Most men spend their whole lives believing they're making the right sacrifices, working late, missing a few dinners, skipping a few ball games, telling themselves, "I'm doing this for my family." That's exactly what I believed. It took me 40 years and one ordinary afternoon after I retired to realize my family had already learned how to live without me. I can't change the years I missed, but maybe my story will make someone else look up from work before it's too late. The company gave me a standing ovation the day I retired. 40 years, one company, one hard hat, one job that slowly became my whole life. Somebody handed me a gold watch. Somebody else slapped me on the back. A couple of the younger guys said, "Don't disappear on us." I laughed, told them I'd probably stop by once in a while just to make sure they weren't doing everything wrong. Everybody laughed. So did I. Driving home, I honestly believed the best part of my life was about to begin. Slow mornings, fishing, breakfast with my grandkids, road trips with Karen, coffee that didn't have to be finished in 10 minutes. For the first time in 40 years, my calendar belonged to me. I pulled into the driveway smiling, walked inside. The house was quiet. Karen had left a note on the counter. At the library, dinner's in the oven. Love you. I smiled, checked my phone. Nothing, no missed calls, no texts, not from my son, not from my daughter. Didn't think much about it. People have jobs, kids, lives. 3 days later, I was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee when something hit me harder than retirement itself. My retirement hadn't changed anybody else's schedule. Not Michael's, not Emily's, not even Karen's. They already had routines. Week after week, month after month. Lives that kept moving, whether I was working or not. That's when I realized something I wish I'd understood 20 years earlier. The company needed a replacement. My family never did. That thought stayed with me long after the applause was over, long after the gold watch found a drawer in my bedroom. My name's David. I'm 68 years old. I spent 40 years managing construction projects, started pushing wheelbarrows, ended up running million-dollar jobs, schedules, budgets, deadlines, problems. People expected me to have answers. Most of the time, I did. Karen and I have been married 41 years, 2 kids, Michael, Emily. People usually assume there had to be some big reason everything turned out this way. An affair, alcohol, gambling, something dramatic. There wasn't. I came home every night, paid every bill, never disappeared, never stopped loving my family. I simply worked, constantly. If somebody needed overtime, I volunteered. Weekend inspection, I'd take it. Out-of-town project, no problem. Back then, that felt like being a good husband, providing, protecting, making sure my family never worried about money. Karen would sometimes watch me packing another suitcase. "The kids miss you." I'd zip the bag shut. "I'm doing this for them." I wasn't making excuses. I truly believed it. The hardest part is realizing good intentions can still leave empty chairs. Most mornings, I left the house before sunrise. The porch light was still on. The neighborhood was quiet. Karen was always up before me. I never asked her to be. She simply was. The coffee maker would already be gurgling. She'd hand me a travel mug. "You'll be home Friday?" "That's the plan." She'd smile. "Drive safe." Looking back, I think both of us knew Friday wasn't really a promise. Sometimes Friday became Saturday. Sometimes Saturday became Monday. Construction schedules don't care about Little League. Concrete gets poured when the weather allows. Steel arrives when it arrives. Inspectors show up when inspectors show up. Back then, every problem felt urgent. Every delay felt expensive. Every extra hour seemed justified. By the time I got home, the kids were usually asleep. Sometimes I'd stand in the hallway for a minute, just listening. Emily slept with a nightlight until she was almost 10. Michael always kicked his blanket onto the floor. Karen would laugh. Just like you. I'd pull the blanket back over him, close the door, tell myself I'd spend more time with them after this project. There was always another project. One spring afternoon, Karen called while I was standing in a trailer looking over blueprints. "You busy?" I looked outside. Concrete trucks were lined up. 2 electricians were waiting for an answer. A crane operator was waving at me through the window. "A little." She hesitated. "Michael's championship game is tonight." "I know. He keeps asking if you're coming." I looked at my watch. I already knew the answer before I checked. If I left, tomorrow's inspection would fall apart. "I'll try." Karen didn't answer right away. She'd heard those words before. That evening, I called from the truck, driving back to the hotel. "How'd he do?" "He hit a double." "That's my boy." Another pause. "He looked for you." I didn't answer. Karen quietly added, "He kept looking toward the stands." The highway stretched out in front of me. Headlights, taillights, miles of asphalt. I'd never felt farther from home. "I'll make the next one." She said something I'll never forget. "I know you want to." Not, "I know you will." Just, "I know you want to." There's a difference. At the time, I didn't hear it. Now, I do. The next game came, then another. Some I made, most I didn't. Years later, Michael couldn't tell you which games I attended. He remembered exactly which ones I missed. Funny how children remember disappointment more clearly than success. Emily had a school play in 5th grade. Karen called me the night before. "You remember tomorrow?" "Of course." "She's nervous." "I'll be there." I meant it. The next afternoon, one supplier delivered the wrong steel. Everything stopped. Phones started ringing. By the time I got free, parents were already driving home from the school auditorium. Karen recorded the play on our little camcorder. About a week later, we watched it together. Emily stood under the stage lights, reading her lines. Clear voice, confident smile. Halfway through, Karen whispered, "Watch." Every couple of minutes, Emily glanced toward the back doors. Not at the audience, the doors. Waiting. I knew exactly who she expected to walk through them. She never brought it up, never complained. Kids don't always tell you they're disappointed. Sometimes, they simply stop believing you'll come. Birthdays weren't much different. I'd get home after everyone had gone to bed. Karen always saved me a piece of cake, covered with aluminum foil. I'd sit alone at the kitchen table, eating cold cake in a quiet house, telling myself, next year would be different. Next year, looking back, those might have been the 2 most expensive words I ever said. Retirement was supposed to fix everything. At least, that's what I'd believed for years. I'd pictured it 100 different ways. Coffee on the porch with Karen. Fishing whenever the weather looked good. Road trips with no destination. Grandkids running through the backyard. Family dinners that lasted longer than the meal itself. For 40 years, I'd been telling myself the same thing. When I retire, turns out, retirement doesn't pause everybody else's life. It just hands you back your own. Michael had his job. Emily had her family. The grandkids had baseball, soccer, birthday parties, sleepovers. Karen volunteered at the library every Tuesday and Thursday. Wednesday mornings, she met 2 friends for breakfast. Friday afternoons, she helped at the church food pantry. She'd built a life too. One afternoon, I stood in the kitchen looking at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Every square had something written on it. I laughed. "You've gotten busier since I retired." Karen smiled. "I guess I have. What happened to all that free time we kept talking about?" She looked at me for a second. "We waited a long time." That was all she said. At the time, I smiled and nodded. Later, I realized what she'd really meant. She couldn't spend 20 years waiting for me to finally have time. Eventually, she had to start living them. One Saturday morning, I sent a group text. "Anybody feel like burgers this afternoon?" A few minutes later, Emily answered, "Soccer tournament today, rain check." Then Michael, "Working overtime. Sorry, Dad." Tyler had baseball. Emma was spending the weekend at a friend's house. Nobody was making excuses. Nobody was avoiding me. Nobody sounded guilty. They were simply living the lives they'd already built. I stood there holding my phone. Karen looked over from the sink. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." I set the phone down. "They're busy." She nodded. "I know." That afternoon, I grilled 2 hamburgers, one for Karen, one for me. The patio table had 6 chairs around it. Only 2 were occupied. I couldn't stop looking at the empty ones. A couple weeks later, I called Michael. "How about fishing next Saturday?" He sounded like he wished he could say yes. "I'd love to, but Tyler's got practice." "What about the weekend after?" "We're visiting Sarah's parents." "What about after that?" "I'll check." After we hung up, I caught myself smiling, not because I'd made plans, because I'd heard myself sounding exactly like Karen used to. "What about next weekend?" For years, she'd been trying to find little pieces of time for us. Now, I was the one searching. Only everyone else already had calendars that didn't leave much room. One Wednesday evening, Karen was in the backyard, planting flowers. She always liked working outside around sunset. Said the yard felt quieter then. I carried out 2 glasses of iced tea. She smiled. "Thanks." I sat beside the flower bed. For a while, we just watched the breeze move through the trees. Then I quietly said, "I thought retirement would be different." She pressed the dirt around a small yellow flower. I did too. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "The kids stopped waiting for you years ago." I looked at her. She still wasn't looking at me, just working with her hands. I don't mean that to be cruel. I know. When they were little, every game, every school program, every birthday, they'd ask if you were coming. She paused. I'd tell them. Maybe. Another pause. After a while, I stopped saying maybe. I felt something tighten in my chest. I started saying, "We'll see." She brushed the dirt from her gloves. And eventually, I stopped promising anything at all. The hardest part wasn't what she said. It was realizing I couldn't remember when she'd stopped saying, "Dad will be there." Somewhere over the years, those words had quietly disappeared, and I never even noticed. Those words followed me for days. Not because Karen raised her voice. She never did. She said them the way she'd said almost everything during our marriage, quietly, without trying to win an argument. That somehow made them impossible to ignore. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I walked upstairs into the attic. I wasn't looking for anything, just needed somewhere the house couldn't remind me how quiet it had become. I pulled the chain hanging from the ceiling. A single light bulb flickered on. Dust drifted through the air. Boxes lined the walls. Christmas decorations, old camping gear, baby clothes we'd kept for reasons I couldn't remember. Near the back, I found a cardboard box with one word written across the side. Kids. I carried it toward the light, sat down on the floor. Inside were school programs, construction paper art projects, Father's Day cards, old report cards, little pieces of childhood Karen had refused to throw away. The first thing I picked up was a crayon drawing, a little house, a tree, a dog, stick figures, mom, brother, sister, dog, no father. At first, I figured maybe I'd been on a business trip. Then I turned the paper over. Karen had written 3 simple words. Daddy was working. I stared at them, longer than I should have. I honestly couldn't remember ever seeing that drawing before. Maybe she'd shown it to me. Maybe I'd nodded while answering a phone call. Maybe I'd set it down planning to look at it later. I don't know. The fact that I didn't know hurt almost as much as the drawing itself. I kept going through the box. Emily's 5th grade program. Karen had circled her name. Beside it, she'd written, David couldn't make this one. Another envelope held 2 unused baseball tickets. Michael's championship game, rain delay, rescheduled. I remembered buying the tickets. I didn't remember missing the game. Karen must have put them back in the envelope afterward, not to make me feel guilty, just because she saved things. She always believed memories mattered, even the painful ones. Then I found a Father's Day card, blue construction paper, tiny handprints across the front. Inside, crooked letters. Love you, Dad. Underneath, one more sentence. Maybe next time you'll come. I closed the card, couldn't read another word. For a long time, I just sat there on the attic floor. The whole house was silent, and for the first time, I allowed myself to think something I'd spent 40 years avoiding. I hadn't just missed moments. I'd slowly taught my family not to count on me. That realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled in quietly, like dust, almost impossible to notice until you looked closely. For 40 years, I told myself I was sacrificing for my family. What I never stopped to ask was what they were sacrificing for me. Karen gave up making promises. Michael stopped looking toward the parking lot. Emily stopped expecting the back door to open before the school play ended. Nobody complained. They simply adjusted. Children are good at that. Sometimes too good. The next morning, I carried the box downstairs. Karen was already in the kitchen. Coffee was brewing. She looked at the box. A sad little smile crossed her face. You found it. I nodded. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She already knew. She walked over, rested her hand on my shoulder for a second, then quietly poured me a cup of coffee. Neither of us said anything. Some conversations don't happen with words. Some happen when 2 people finally stop pretending they don't already know the truth. The next morning, I called Michael, not because I needed help with something, not because anything was broken. I just wanted to hear my son's voice. He answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, Dad. Hey. A pause. Everything okay? Yeah. I was wondering. You still grab breakfast before work on Wednesdays? I do. Mind if I join you? He hesitated for just a second, then said, Yeah, I'd like that. The diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same booze, same coffee, same waitress who somehow remembered everybody's order. Michael walked in wearing work boots, lunchbox under one arm. He looked tired, really tired. I knew that look. I'd worn it for most of my life. We ordered eggs, talked about traffic, the weather, his truck making a strange noise. Nothing important. At least, that's what it would have sounded like to anyone sitting nearby. Halfway through breakfast, I looked at him. "You working much overtime?" He smiled. "More than I should." I nodded. "I know how that goes." He chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I learned from somebody." He said it with a smile, not as an accusation. That almost made it worse. We finished eating, walked outside together. I almost apologized, almost tried to explain 40 years in 30 seconds. Instead, I asked, "Same time next Wednesday?" He smiled. "I can do that." Sometimes, showing up is a better apology than giving one. Wednesday breakfasts became our routine. Some mornings, we talked about football. Some mornings, about old trucks. One week, we argued for 15 minutes over the best barbecue place in town. Another week, we barely talked at all. Funny thing was, I stopped worrying about whether the conversations were meaningful. They didn't have to be. That's how relationships are built. Not through one big conversation, through 100 ordinary ones. A few weeks later, Emily called. "Dad." "Yeah?" "The kids have a soccer game Saturday." She paused. "I know you're probably..." "What time?" Silence. Then she laughed. 10. "I'll be there." "You don't have to." "I want to." Saturday morning. I left the house early, bought coffee on the way, parked before anyone else had even unfolded their lawn chairs. Parents trickled onto the field carrying coolers. Kids chased soccer balls while pretending to warm up. Emma spotted me first. "Grandpa!" She came running across the grass. "You came!" There was something in her voice I couldn't ignore. She sounded surprised, not excited. Surprised. She grabbed my hand. "Come on, I'll show you where I play." As she pulled me toward the field, I realized she'd already learned the same lesson her father once had. Don't expect too much. That thought stayed with me through the entire game. 7-year-olds aren't exactly professional soccer players. Half the time, they all chase the same ball. Parents cheered anyway. Every kick, every stumble, every smile. I loved every minute. Afterward, Emily walked beside me toward the parking lot. "Dad." "Yeah? I'm really glad you came." "So am I." She smiled. "The kids are starting to expect you now." I stopped walking for a second, then quietly said, "This time, I'd like to deserve it." Karen noticed the difference before anyone else did. One afternoon, she found me sitting on the back porch, not fixing anything, not making a list, just drinking coffee. She looked around. "No project today." I smiled. "I'm trying something different." "What's that?" "Leaving things broken." She laughed. "I never thought I'd hear you say that." Neither had I. For 40 years, every loose board, every dripping faucet, every unfinished repair felt urgent. Now I understood something I'd spent most of my life missing. Houses can wait. Sometimes people can't. The months settled into a rhythm. Wednesday breakfast with Michael, coffee with Emily every other Thursday, soccer games, school concerts, Saturday mornings that finally belonged to my family instead of my job. One afternoon, my grandson Tyler called. "Grandpa." "Hey buddy, you coming Saturday?" "What happens Saturday?" He laughed. "My baseball game." I looked at the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. There it was, 10 o'clock, already circled. I'll be there. A little pause. You promise? That word stopped me. Promise. For a second, I was standing in our old kitchen again, Karen saying, I'll tell them we'll see. I took a slow breath. I promise. Saturday morning arrived cool and clear. I left the house early, bought a cup of coffee on the way, pulled into the parking lot while parents were still unloading folding chairs. Tyler looked toward the entrance while he was warming up. The moment he spotted me, his shoulders relaxed. He smiled, raised one hand. I waved back. Nobody else noticed, but I did. That little wave meant more to me than the gold watch sitting in my dresser drawer. The game itself wasn't anything special. He struck out once, got a single later, made a nice catch in right field. Just an ordinary youth baseball game. 40-year-old David would have missed every inning. 68-year-old David didn't look at his phone once. After the game, we stopped for ice cream, chocolate for Tyler, vanilla for me. He sat across from me, swinging his legs under the booth. You know something? What? I always look for you first now. I smiled. I'm glad. He shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. I know where you sit. Simple words, but they stayed with me. Because years earlier, Michael used to look toward the stands the very same way. Too many times, he hadn't found me. A year passed, then another. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Michael still worked too much sometimes. Emily still had weeks where everything seemed scheduled down to the minute. Karen still filled the refrigerator calendar faster than I could read it. But something had changed. Not because everyone made more room for me, because I finally started making room for them. One Saturday morning, I was sitting at another baseball field, coffee in one hand, phone in my pocket, turned off. No meetings, no deadlines, no project waiting for Monday. Just sunshine, fresh-cut grass, parents talking quietly, kids laughing in the dugout. Tyler stepped into the batter's box. Before the pitcher threw the first pitch, he looked toward the stands, straight to the place where I always sat. He found me, gave me a small wave. I waved back. Then he turned around and got ready to hit. The whole moment lasted maybe 2 seconds. Nobody else would have thought anything of it. But I knew exactly what it meant. He expected me to be there. That expectation was something I'd spent years trying to earn back. For most of my life, I believed loving my family meant giving them everything I could earn. Looking back, I wish I'd understood something much sooner. Kids don't remember overtime. They don't remember promotions. They don't remember the projects that couldn't wait until Monday. They remember who was sitting in the stands. Retirement didn't give me my family back. Those years were gone. Nothing could change that. What retirement gave me was one last chance to stop measuring my life by what I built and start measuring it by who I showed up for. I used to think providing meant making sure my family had everything they needed. Now, I think the greatest thing I could have given them was the one thing I kept promising I'd have later, my time. And if there's one thing I hope another man understands before he learns it the hard way, it's this. There will always be another deadline, another project, another reason to stay one more hour. But there are only so many Saturdays before the people you love stop looking toward the stands.